I have so many moms who come to me and they're like, my son doesn't talk to me anymore. I'm losing him. I don't know what to do. So if this is you, you're not alone, and I'm going to show you how to fix it. So if you're new here, my name's Agam Dewan. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. And so it's my job to help moms connect with their sons and help their sons. You might be running into a situation where, your son comes home from school or from work and you talk to him and he says, like, barely says anything, right? Even I have run into this situation, like, myself. Like, sometimes my mom will ask me stuff and I'll say fine, and like I won't reveal what's really going on because I'm worried about a reaction, or I don't feel like she'll understand, or I'm nervous about it. Like, I'll give you the perfect example. I remember one time my place got robbed, actually. And so because my place got robbed, I did not want to. My mom asked how things were, and I said fine. But then I secretly called my dad later and I told him, like, hey, this is what happened. And so we worked through a plan, like, okay, we're gonna call the police, and like, we're gonna upgrade the security system. And so the reason was because I felt like my mom would get overly involved, overly emotional, and overly anxious, which I would have to compensate for. And so it was more mental stress for me. So I'll give you a different example. I remember I had this 25-year-old patient, and this guy, his mom was one who was seeking out his care, seeking out his help. And so what she said was that, he never wants to talk to me. He'll barely say hi to me. They lived together. The kid had lost his job, and so he was living at home trying to find a new job. And, she would try to pressure him to talk, but he just wouldn't want to. And then, once I got to know the kid, got to know the family, I realized that the reason was because the mom was stuck on his gaming. So basically she would say the kid's gaming and he's gaming too much, and that's why he's not finding a job. And the kid's like, or the adult, he's like, no, it's not because of the gaming. Like, my gaming is healthy, right? All their conversations would devolve into gaming. And so from the kid's perspective, he felt pressure that, okay, mom wasn't really understanding me. She wasn't listening to me. And she's just like focused on the gaming. So, if I was that guy, I would avoid my mom too if everything was going to become punitive. So now what do we do? So for example, with this mom, I told her something separate. I said, okay, now we need to focus on you rebuilding the relationship with your kid. Like, this is the most important thing. This is more important than trying to get him off the couch or like trying to set up a plan, because the mom was like, oh, I've identified so many things he could do. He could apply to this job and he could apply there, and if he dopamine detox, this would help him. And I was like, I agree. I 100% agree, mom, but he's not ready to listen to that because the relationship isn't there. These are the things we want to do to start fixing that. First is we want to start asking the right questions. Instead of asking closed-ended questions like, how is your day? Fine. Or how are you? Good. Or, ask more like, so what did you like about your day? What did you dislike about it? What was the best thing that happened? What was the worst thing? What was the funniest thing? What's something that annoyed you? Same thing with the gaming, right? Like, I always tell moms, and the moms, if you want to connect with your kid, just ask him, like, what game are you playing? Like, tell me about that. Like, what do you do in this game? And, you might get a better response that way. Like, I remember one time I was 30 years old. I'm sitting next to my dad in an airplane, and we're flying to India. And so I had my Nintendo Switch and I was playing Pokemon Let's Go. And my dad starts just randomly out of the blue asking about this. Like, keep in mind, we've had maybe 2 video game conversations in our entire lives, because like that's just not his interest. And he's asking me, so I'm like telling him, like, yeah, these are Pokemon, and like this is how you catch them, this is how you battle, and all of this. I remember feeling that moment because like I was excited as a 30-year-old man to tell my father about this Pokemon video game. So if I feel this way, then your son definitely feels this way, and they definitely, like, if you tap into something that they're interested in, they'll much more likely to talk to you. Another thing that can help is you want to use what I call the bowling ball approach. Imagine your son like a bowling ball, right? And you want him to be successful, you want him to be happy and thriving and all that. But you have to let him fail and take some hits sometimes. What I mean by that is he has to have some freedom to be able to make mistakes. Because, like with the bowling ball, you're not really bowling if the gutters or the guardrails are always up. Like, the guardrails have got to be down for you to actually start bowling. So basically, if your son is like, if he says stuff like, hey, he's gaming too much, right? Like, don't just immediately correct him. Or like if he says, I'm not gaming enough, don't just be like, oh, you are. Or if he says that I applied for a job, you don't be like, oh, you didn't try hard enough. Like, let him experience the consequences of failing a little bit. But the true secret, in my opinion, is how to have a deep conversation. And these are things I use with any patient to connect with them. Like these are the top three. So let's say your son says, hey, I'm doing great, or like this bad thing happened. Like the teacher called on me today and I felt nervous. You can acknowledge what he says. So basically you say, oh, that must have been very hard, right? You're just acknowledging that, or that sounds annoying, or that sounds nerve-wracking, right? Yeah, that's what you're doing. And then what you're also doing is that you're validating those feelings. So you're saying that, I can understand why like you would feel that way, or wow, like anyone would feel, it's very similar to feel that way in your position. Basically making him feel like his thoughts, his feelings, he's not alone. It's called validation. You make him feel normal and accepted for them. Even I find myself wanting this. Like, I was having some work challenges recently, right? Some patients who like things weren't working out with. And so I remember asking one of my colleagues, am I the only one going through this? And then they were like, no, like this has happened to me too. And just that validation helped me emotionally process that issue. And then the other thing that I use this tactic all the time in conversation, it's called reflection. Basically, whatever the person says, you can reflect it back to them. What that means is like if he says, I don't want to go to school, like the teachers don't teach me anything and the kids are annoying and like, I don't see how this helps me because I want to be a plumber. And then you can respond like, oh, so you're saying that school is pointless right now? And then they're like, yeah. And reflection, what you've done is you've summarized all of what they say, and then you just like give one sentence and then they're like, yeah. And then your son's likely going to go, yeah, so like, I think my plumbing career is more important than this. So like, what's the point of school? Whereas like a parent would probably go, no, school is important because of X. Don't correct him. Don't do that. Just literally listen, validate. So then, in that conversation, be like, oh, okay, so it sounds like you're really interested in plumbing. And they'd be like, yeah, because of, and then you can ask like, why makes you interested in plumbing? And they're like, oh, because of blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh, so sounds like you've thought about this a lot, or you've thought really deeply about this. Now you're acknowledging, you're validating. Or you could say, so you like plumbing because you get to work with your hands. And then they're like, yeah. So do you see how all these apply in? It's about connection. That's what you're trying to do with your kid, is you want to connect with him. And once you are able to do that, then all the pieces will fall into place. Like I assure you, anything that you want him to do will be 100 times more easier if he feels like you guys are connected together. So I hope that helps. And so if you're having trouble with your son, his mental health, and you would like some help, feel free to book a consultation with me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting.